Did you know how fiercely the contestants in the very first season of Wilderness Survival had to fight to win? Out there in the wild, some were willing to risk everything, even their own lives, for the grand prize of $500,000. There are even rumors that one contestant once became prey to a black bear, forcing the show to shut down completely. So, what about this season? Will anyone have to face that terrifying black bear again? Let's dive right into the competition and find out. For an entire day and night, Chris went without a single bite of protein. After chopping just one log, he was already gasping for breath. So he changed his plan. He'd start a fire, boil some water, and fill his stomach that way. But after preparing everything, he rubbed his fire stick against the shavings for half an hour. And not a single spark appeared. The air was too damp, too heavy with moisture. If he wanted fire, he'd have to work harder. But looking at him, he didn't seem like someone built for hardship. He dropped everything, crawled back to camp, and collapsed into sleep. In the middle of the night, the howl of wolves jolted him awake. Don't be fooled by Chris's big, muscular frame. Inside, he was still a frightened child. Before joining the show, he'd already feared wild animals. He never thought he'd actually meet one on day 2. That encounter shattered his composure completely. After a sleepless, terrified night, he called the producers at dawn to quit. Even after the crew tried to persuade him, he admitted he'd been traumatized since childhood. Always terrified of wolves and predators. He couldn't believe it. On only his second day, he'd already run into a pack. A dozen mouths back home were counting on him to survive and provide, so he decided to grab his bucket and get out while he could. No one could change his mind. Chris left, too scared to even go back for his gear.
Stay tuned for what happens next. This is true wilderness survival. 10 contestants set foot on the island, some near bear dens, others near wolf packs. Within just 2 days, 2 had already quit. One contestant even faced a black bear right at his camp, forcing him to call for rescue. The rescue team drove through the night to reach him. There were even rumors of a bear attack so severe that the show was temporarily banned from airing. By day 3, only 8 contestants remained. Mike, one of them, was nearly driven insane by his neighbor Sam. By day, Sam screamed across the river like a madman. By night, real wolves circled his camp. Sometimes Mike lost his sense of control, almost charging out to fight the wolves himself. If it went on like that, he'd lose his mind for sure. So, he decided to move his camp the farther, the better. After hiking all morning, he reached a wide lake by noon. Across the water, the land looked flat and peaceful, a perfect place to rebuild. It was far enough away that Sam's shouting, no matter how loud, would never reach him again. But there was one new problem: how to get across. They say, as long as you don't lose willpower, solutions will always outnumber problems. To cross a river, the simplest way is to build a survival raft. And as a survival instructor himself, this was child's play for Mike. He gathered branches, wrapped them tightly with waterproof cloth, and crafted a simple floating device. Then, stripping off his clothes, he dragged it to the river. To his surprise, the raft floated perfectly stable and buoyant. He paddled carefully toward the opposite shore. And just as he'd hoped, the place was perfect. It was the perfect spot to build a shelter. A natural spring ran right beside it, fresh water solved in one stroke. 2 birds, 1 stone. He shuttled back and forth for 2.5 hours, finally getting all his gear across. With daylight fading, he had to raise a shelter fast. First, a simple A-frame. Then, a waterproof tarp stretched over the top. To avoid getting drenched in a downpour, he added another protective layer above it. When he was finally done, Mike boiled a pot of water, downed a big gulp to trick his stomach. A whole day's exhaustion melted in that moment. No more maddening noise to rattle his nerves tonight. He could finally sleep. Meanwhile, the clueless Sam had no idea his howling could have gotten Mike killed. Right now, he was rigging a rain catch. He axed a hollow into a dead trunk, lined it with waterproof tarp, and would let the rain fill it to the brim. Sam, 22, entered the show because his girlfriend got pregnant. Trying to step up like a man, he wanted that $500,000 prize for a proper wedding and formula for the baby on the way. With water handled, Sam planned a luxury lakeside shelter. A place with a view. He cut a few trees, threw up a quick frame, and draped on the miracle tarp. Done, at least in his eyes. One strong gust and the whole thing might fly. The man in the red cap was Lucas. His hat had big kawaii eyes, a trick to fool black bears attacking from behind. Those eyes were stitched on for one reason: distract the predator and die more peacefully if it came to that. Back home, Lucas was a forest survival instructor, often living off-grid with his best friend. At 32, he was still single. His family hoped this show would change that. Win $500,000, settle down, find a wife. That was the dream. Then Lucas started on a long-term shelter. He felled bigger logs, lashed them tight into a solid frame, then capped it with his wonder tarp. A rough villa frame stood complete. Now he'd hunt and build in shifts, finishing as he went. For better sleep, he wove a bed out of pine boughs. With camp in order, all he could do was hope to make it through the night. Elsewhere, near the bridge, another player was still struggling to adapt. He woke to the bleak view and it hit him. This was a survival contest. Only then did he realize where he truly was. Days of relentless rain left everything soaked, no way to make fire. So he headed to the riverbank, hoping to scavenge some protein for his failing body. But when he turned around, the sight nearly made him wet himself. Across the water, a black bear 7, maybe 800 pounds was foraging. It didn't seem to have noticed him yet, but one wrong move, and that could change fast. But this guy had a death wish no one could stop him. Joe figured bears have short legs, can't run fast, so from the far bank he started shouting at it. The black bear pricked up its ears, suddenly alert it saw a young man practically begging for death, yet showed no rage, it simply lumbered toward the bridge. Now Joe completely lost his cool. Soaked pants be damned, he sprinted straight for camp. Once he was out of the bear's sight, a new fear hit. That animal wouldn't just let this go. He didn't want a midnight visit while he slept. So Joe packed up his gear, crossed to the other bank, and looked for a safer campsite. The terrain there was flat, facing the sea scenery like springtime. More importantly, when the tide receded, the shore teemed with seafood and all-you-can-eat ocean buffet. After a day of hustling, Joe was half dead with exhaustion. He built a big fire to reward himself. Time slipped to day 4. At dawn, Joe woke to bad news. His fire steel was gone. Terrible, this place was soaked with humidity. Even with a fire steel, getting a flame took serious effort. He frantically checked his footage. Turns out after starting the fire last night, he'd left the steel in the coals. Fire steel flash point is low. He sifted ash for half a day and found nothing. This time he was truly done for. Sitting on the beach, Joe wanted to slap himself for that boneheaded move. The more he thought, the angrier he got, and vice versa. In the end, as expected, Joe called to tap out. When production arrived, he laid out the reason for quitting. No one could quite believe it. Before this, 2 contestants had quit from bears and wolves, but leaving because he lost a fire steel? Joe was the first. Facing the camera, he didn't care about anyone's side-eye. He admitted plainly, maybe he just hadn't prepared well enough, and a tiny mistake forced him to withdraw. In the end, Joe packed up and boarded a little plane home. The competition has been going on for less than a week, yet 2 contestants have already dropped out. Is this a sign of how brutal the challenge truly is, or simply proof that they weren't strong enough to continue? What will happen next? Let's keep watching to find out. Wayne was the 7th contestant this season and luckiest of the bunch. At dawn, he spotted something drifting downriver. He hauled it in. It was a fishing float, a treasure in the wild. Drill the right-sized hole, and it doubles as a night pot. 4 days in, Wayne still hadn't picked a camp spot. Sleeping place? The tides had forced him out before. So, the next mission, find higher, drier ground. After a circuit of the mountain, he found a gem flat on all sides. Full sun, perfect for a long-term shelter. There was one catch, an animal trail nearby, which meant black bears might pass through often. Wayne shrugged, no big deal. Bag a bear and victories almost guaranteed. Back home, his hobby was bear hunting. If he could pull it off here, he'd be sitting pretty. Wayne is a true master of weapons. He even owns a private armory and has a deep fascination with the primitive era. His handcrafted creations aren't just beautiful, they're incredibly durable too. He joined this competition to truly test himself and experience the raw brutality of nature. Once he was done, Wayne gathered some dry bark and started rubbing sticks together. Soon enough, the friction brought a small fire to life. With fire ready, he fetched a pot of water from the river. It might not add much protein, but at least it could fill his empty stomach. The 8th contestant was named Alan. Before joining the competition, he had purposely gained 15 kilograms so he could better endure protein deprivation. He roamed the forest in search of a spot to build his camp until he was drenched. Head to toe, not a single dry patch on his body, and all that effort just left him exhausted. He stopped by a small pond and filled his pot with water, but had no fire to boil it. So he risked it, drank it raw just to quench his thirst. Alan was from the state of Georgia. He and his wife avoided the noise of the city and chose a quiet suburban life, spending peaceful, happy days together in their cozy little kitchen. Dreaming of owning a small farm near home and living self-sufficiently, he boldly signed up for this season's challenge. After fetching water, he kept searching for a place to pitch his camp. Then suddenly he stumbled upon a gigantic slug, not exactly appetizing to look at, but it was made up of almost 99% fat, a rare delicacy in the wild. He grabbed it and took it back to his temporary camp, threw it over the fire, and roasted it. 15 minutes later, his giant slug feast was ready. After 3 days of near starvation, Alan took his first bite. Not too salty, not too bland, perfectly balanced. The taste was surprisingly amazing. Its protein content could rival 10 times that of beef. The only downside, it was a bit sticky on the throat. Meanwhile, back at Wayne's camp, he was strolling by the riverbank, praying to the heavens for a source of protein, and it seemed the gods actually listened. Right there on the shore lay a dead duck. He picked it up for a closer look. There were no visible wounds. For a moment, he couldn't tell if it had drowned or died of disease, but for his own safety, he decided not to take the risk. Eating dead animals could be dangerous, so he tossed it straight back into the river. Oh, no! If the heavens saw him waste food like that, they would surely punish him. And that punishment came faster than expected. That night, while relieving himself outside his tent, a dark shadow suddenly lunged out from the trees. He looked up and froze. A black bear? The distance between them was less than 20 meters. Without even realizing his water tap was still running, he bolted straight back to his tent, thinking that hiding inside would keep him safe. But then came the crunch of branches right outside. He turned on his camera. 2 glowing eyes stared back at him, fixed directly on his flimsy little shelter. Wayne was so terrified he wet the floor again. No time for pride or his earlier tough guy talk. He immediately called the production team for help. But because it was night, the helicopter and rescue boat couldn't take off. The production team had no choice but to race at full speed toward Wayne's location. Meanwhile, they kept contacting him through satellite phone to ensure his safety. At that very moment, the black bear had already found Wayne's shelter. It was cautiously circling, probing his perimeter. Wayne, trembling uncontrollably, curled up in fear. He could even smell the foul, fishy odor coming from the bear's mouth. At that time, the rescue team had reached the trailhead, carrying bear spray and flashlights, hurrying toward the filming site. But halfway there, they suddenly lost contact with him. At first, the team feared Wayne had already been attacked, but as they neared the campsite, they noticed flickering light in the distance. It was Wayne holding a torch high, defending himself. The situation was truly critical. When the two sides finally met, the tension that had been stretched tight at last snapped loose in relief. In that instant, Wayne realized his own life was worth far more than $500,000. All he wanted now was to go home far away from this dangerous place. Under the escort of the production crew, Wayne safely withdrew from the competition. The show had only been running for 5 days, yet 4 players were gone. The very first season of Survival in the Wild was proving to be the harshest ever. Players had barely arrived when they found themselves camping near bears or wolf packs, and even mountain lions prowled nearby. Here, it wasn't just survival skills being tested, but raw courage itself. In only 5 days, 4 players had fallen. How would the remaining 6 fare? We'll soon find out. As time moved into day 5, only 6 fierce contenders remained. Over the past few days, Alan had eaten nothing but a slug. Now he was starving his stomach flat against his spine. He headed toward the shore, hoping to find some protein. But after a long search, there was nothing but seaweed. Perhaps driven by hunger, Alan grabbed a handful and shoved it into his mouth, chewing wildly. It tasted like cheap dried seaweed from a 5,000 dong packet. Low in calories, but rich in vitamins A, B, and C. Better than starving, he thought. Back at camp, Alan took his knife and carved a notch into a wooden stick. Each mark represented one day he had survived. His goal to last 80 days out here would be enough to satisfy him. Brant, 44 years old, was the 9th contestant to join the game. According to the show, late arrivals often had exceptional strength. For days, Brant still hadn't found a source of protein. The environment was too damp, too wet to even start a fire, so instead he used peat to filter water, tricking his stomach into calm. He believed it could remove impurities from the water. After one large gulp, he actually felt a bit more awake. Brant had once been a commando, and after retiring, he became Odell's personal trainer. Over the decades, he had fought in countless battles, honing his survival skills. His outdoor experience and physical strength were unmatched. He joined this competition to prove that he's still got it. His goal is to hunt large game for protein, but so far, he hasn't found even a scrap of protein and can only survive on filtered water. Let's hope it doesn't upset his stomach. Meanwhile, Lucas has picked the perfect spot to build a wild home. These past few days, even without food, he still wants to live in something luxurious. After felling a big tree with his small frame, he struggled to haul massive logs, which amazed everyone. After sawing more than 10 beams, Lucas was exhausted and could only sit to rest a while. With food so scarce, building something this ambitious is truly daunting. Let's hope Lucas won't have to quit the game before his project is finished. Dustin is the last player to join this season. His main food source is seaweed from the shore. He picks up a large strand, peels the outer layer with his knife, and eats it on the spot. The seaweed is crisp, easy to eat, neither too salty nor too bland. Pleasant on the palate, and rich in vitamins A, B, and C. Back home in California, Dustin and his wife live freely, no plans for kids yet, and preparing to travel around the world, but their budget is limited. When he heard the winner of this survival contest would get $500,000, he decided to give it a shot. Seeing logs washed ashore by the waves, Dustin decided to use them to build a luxurious shelter on the beach. He started hauling one back to camp, but soaked in seawater, the logs were far heavier. After only a few steps, Dustin was wiped out and decided to stop. He left the logs there for later when he'd eaten enough to regain strength. Meanwhile, Mike is also documenting his life in the wild. Mike has to carry filming gear weighing up to 40 kilos, pacing back and forth along the river. That kind of effort burns precious energy for nothing and leaves him constantly hungry. Watching small birds sunbathe on the branches, Mike relies on his years of hunting experience to judge that they frequent this area. Fish heads left on the bank are clear evidence of that, so he decides to set a net here, hoping the river fish won't disappoint and will rush into the mesh. At night, Mike boils a pot of water to trick his stomach. In case the fire dies late at night, he shaves off some wood shavings with his knife, then takes his metal bait tin, packs the shavings inside, and lights them. Before long, the organics in the shavings carbonize into char. Mike has a box of dry tinder, also known as char cloth, and he tests his flint striker. Sure enough, it catches instantly. Now he no longer has to worry about starting a fire. Late at night, Brent's stomach began rumbling loudly, and soon after, he was struck with diarrhea. This was clearly a result of drinking unboiled water all this time. Days of it had taken a toll. When morning came, his symptoms showed no signs of improving. To find out the cause, he followed the river upstream to investigate, and when he arrived, he nearly threw up everything he had eaten. The riverbank was littered with rotting fish and shrimp. The stench was unbearable. Realizing he had been drinking this same water for days, Brent wished he could just disappear. Back at camp, the more he thought about it, the worse he felt. Panic began to set in. He feared he might have parasites in his body. If untreated, it could lead to sepsis. The thought terrified him. At that moment, Brent realized $500,000 meant nothing compared to his life. Finally, he decided to withdraw from the competition. When the crew arrived, the medics immediately gave Brent a full checkup and concluded it was simply contaminated water that had caused his diarrhea. Thinking back, 4 contestants had already quit so early in the competition. The producers began to worry about ratings. If this kept up, viewership would surely drop. So they decided to give Brent a second chance. But he refused to listen. He insisted he was gravely ill and demanded to be sent home for treatment. "I've been in combat," he said firmly. "I've worked in the worst places on Earth. I won't die out here." And with that, Brent officially withdrew from the season. After Brent's departure, 5 strong contenders still remained. Meanwhile, Lucas, while exploring new areas outdoors, discovered a patch full of wild oil mushrooms. In the wild, this was considered a rare and precious find. It ranked 6th among top survival foods. If he could catch a wild bird and make mushroom stew with it, he wouldn't trade that divine meal for $500,000. The competition was finally stabilizing. Most contestants had learned to avoid bear territory. While others searched tirelessly for protein to fill their stomachs, Alan's method was far simpler and rougher. Right beside his camp grew endless seaweed. Each day, he'd grab a handful and eat it fresh, crispy and satisfying as night fell. That same night, Mike, driven by hunger, risked going to check his net. When he pulled it up, the weight felt different. There had to be fish inside. Sure enough, after checking carefully, he had caught a fish weighing about 7 to 8 pounds. It was unbelievable luck. Tonight, he wouldn't have to go hungry anymore. To guard against a jaguar attack in the dark, Mike hurried back to camp, fish in hand, and lit a fire to cook. He cleaned the fish expertly, skewered it on a stick, and roasted it over the flames. After 15 minutes, the skin was golden and crispy. Mike couldn't wait any longer and took a bite immediately. The fish is tender, fresh, silky, absolutely delicious. However, while he's savoring his meal, he suddenly hears a noise outside the camp. He looks over and jolts. It's a jaguar standing less than 3 meters away. At the slightest sound, the jaguar vanishes back into the forest. Mike is so scared, he wets his pants. Alone in the wilderness, even if he calls for help, the rescue team might not arrive before the worst happens. He thinks, better to hide under the blanket. If fate strikes, there's no escaping it. And if not, may he live to 100. On the morning of day 7, Mike shows only one leg to the camera. What happened last night made him realize his shelter is far too fragile. He decides to upgrade it immediately, at least enough to withstand a lethal attack from a jaguar. The scene cuts to Dustin. Who knows if he's chewing seaweed and tasting a bit of home? All day he does nothing, just sits by the shore, staring toward home. Even when food drifts right up to him, he can't be bothered. After some thought, he goes to pick up beach trash. Useful or not, bringing it back to camp is never a bad idea. This time, Dustin finds something good, a bed plank ready-made and incredibly comfy to lie on. He decides to haul the plank back first. Meanwhile, Sam is hit by a sudden storm, leaving him flustered and unsure what to do. Seeing his shelter bending in the wind, he drops every other thought and starts reinforcing it. Lucas, as usual, keeps chopping trees and building his wild home. As the weather grows colder, he needs to stockpile more wood. While chopping, he spots a small island not far away. With his experience, he knows that on an island, there's surely no shortage of food. A bold idea springs to mind: build a boat to reach the island and look for food. A storm is approaching. The contestants can't go out to forage. They can only hide in their shelters and shiver. At night, thunder, lightning, and rain arrive on cue. Sam faces an even worse situation. His makeshift shelter can't withstand it and disappears without a trace. He's drenched in the rain, hoping he can just make it through the night. Dustin, meanwhile, battles hunger and loneliness with no one to talk to but the camera. It's his first time enduring this kind of pain, and he feels on the verge of collapse. The feeling lingers until the morning of day 8, and the result is no surprise. He makes the call and quits the competition. When the staff arrive, Dustin has no regrets. He candidly says he can't stand the loneliness and decides to withdraw. Perhaps he's simply not cut out for wilderness survival. Instead of hanging on, he chooses to leave early, go home, and enjoy life. And so, Dustin bows out of this season. With only 8 days gone, 6 contestants have already quit. How long can the remaining 4 hold on? We'll have to wait and see. This is what true wilderness survival looks like. Early in the morning, Sam heads to the beach to hunt for seafood. The shore is crawling with tiny crabs. After so many days without a real meal, the sight before him makes his mouth water uncontrollably. He gathers for over half an hour, collecting a total of 33 crabs packed with protein. Back at camp, he roasts them over the fire, and after 15 minutes, his delicious meal is ready. He bites into each crispy crab with delight, the fresh taste awakening every sense. Sam's tired body finally feels satisfied. Overjoyed, he can't help but let out squeals like a happy pig. Meanwhile, Lucas, after discovering a small island a few days ago, feels a new surge of hope. A few days later, he begins building a boat of his own. He selects a sturdy log and carves it to the right size to form the bow, then finds a straight beam to act as the spine, tying both parts firmly together, creating a simple frame. After 7 straight days of work, he survived on boiling water just to calm his hunger. Finally, the frame is complete, and he eagerly prepares to test it. He wraps the hull with waterproof cloth and pushes it into the water. To his surprise, the boat holds up remarkably well, showing no signs of sinking. Though it tends to drift off course, if that island is as rich as he suspects, victory is almost certain. Nothing could stop him now. Lucas continues paddling toward the island. After 15 minutes, he reaches a swampy area where bubbles rise from the surface. Something must be lurking beneath the water. To avoid losing his boat, he carries it onto land and begins exploring the island. Unexpectedly, the island's resources are beyond imagination. In just 3 minutes, he fills a whole bag with oysters, loaded with protein. Now Lucas has no fear of hunger. If things keep going this way, victory is his for sure. Without question. Loaded with his catch, he returns to camp and grills the oysters over fire, savoring each sweet, flavorful bite. His weary body is fully revived. Next comes Mike. Having built his shelter in a damp area and with non-stop rain, his clothes have started to mold. Mold on skin can cause irritation, mild inflammation, or even ulcers if untreated. So when the sun finally breaks through, he hurriedly spreads his clothes out to dry. That night, Mike sits inside his shelter, sleepless, noticing that his shoulder has become red and swollen, signs of prolonged humidity, a warning of rheumatism to come. If he can't fix this soon, he'll be forced to quit. By day 16, Alan hurriedly casts his fishing net. Worried that if he catches too much, he won't have space to cook it, he decides to build a wild outdoor kitchen, starting with a basic frame and layering thick pine branches on top to keep out the rain. After more than 3 hours of work, the kitchen is finished, and immediately, Alan checks the fish net, but there isn't a single catch. He figures the net just hasn't soaked long enough and reassures himself that tomorrow will bring fish. Then he continues foraging along the shoreline, where seaweed and clams are plentiful. Compared to the others, Alan seems like the show's favored child, as he hauls back a pot brimming with clams, returns to camp, and starts cooking. After eating, Alan sits by the sea, savoring the meal, feeling the stark contrast with Sam, who finished the shoreline crabs and now only has dried seaweed left to eat. Sam is disheartened and even weeps at the huge gap between their meals. By day 17, the rain is relentless. No one can go out hunting or gathering. Maybe from too much rain, Lucas feels unwell after eating clams, but finds shelter to rest. Meanwhile, the other 3 can only hunker down in camp, enduring hunger and loneliness. The rain lasts a full week and only stops on day 22. Mike rushes to check his nets, nothing again. But then he spots a rainbow overhead, not just a pretty sight, but a sign to keep believing. Meanwhile, after days of rain, Lucas feels his body showing signs of mildew, so he uses the sunshine to bathe in the open air. He's lost 20 pounds, no doubt from building that lavish shelter of his. Luckily, he now has a steady protein source. As long as loneliness doesn't break him, he could very well win. The camera turns back to Sam, who's been hungry for a week, and finally lands an 8-pound fish. His emotions are beyond words. All he can do is cook himself a feast as a reward. He grabs his axe and carries the fish to the riverbank, cleans it, and treats himself to fresh sashimi right there on the spot. After several days, Alan's body starts giving off an unbearable odor. He can't stand it, so he heads to the river, strips down, and jumps in for a thorough wash. Fresh and clean again, he checks the nets once more and, unsurprisingly, finds a good haul, a big crab, and several small fish. Perhaps he's too hungry. He tears the net open to eat right away. Who knows how he'll use it again now that it's ripped and torn like that? What he didn't expect was a 6-pound fish still caught in the mesh. He cleans it quickly, then tosses fish and crab into the pot, preparing a hearty mixed stew. Of course, assorted fish, clams, and seaweed are must-adds to round out the flavors and textures. Back at camp, Alan whittles a stick into a spoon for himself, every detail carefully thought through. After 15 minutes, the seafood feast is ready. A riot of color and aroma fills the pot, enough to make anyone's mouth water. Alan can't wait another second and digs in right away to the delicious meal. The seaweed works perfectly as a natural neutralizer, removing the fishy smell completely. The taste can only be described as incredible. Looking at the 4 contestants left, they've entered the real stage of survival. No one knows what performances await them next. Let's wait and see what happens. Wilderness survival. It's harsher than anyone imagines. The contestants will do anything to stay alive. If they're lucky, they might catch a dozen small fish to eat. Those without skill may only manage a tiny mouse just enough to fill their stomachs, but the skilled ones, using traps and fishing lines, have caught an 8-pound carp. Facing hunger and loneliness, who will endure until the very end? We'll soon find out. By day 23, 4 contestants remain. Sam wakes up feeling exhausted. Last night, some rats, Jerry, as he calls them, kept him up all night. So, he decides to build traps to teach them a lesson. Maybe, if lucky, he'll even get himself a meal. He crafts the traps using sticks, setting up a sensitive trigger mechanism, and props a large stone above it. If one unlucky Jerry wanders too close, the stone will flatten it like a potato chip in the wild. However, since it's his first time making traps, Sam's craftsmanship is a bit clumsy. He spends 3 hours finishing just 2 traps, scraping his hands on rocks, hoping it's worth it, and that Jerry won't disappoint him. He prays that tomorrow morning he'll wake to a meal of wild chips, crispy and delicious. Meanwhile, Alan, unable to wait, heads out early to check his nets at dawn. Unfortunately, not a single fish is caught, and from his rough handling last time, a huge tear now runs through the net. It's old and worn out, making fishing nearly impossible. Luckily, the shore is scattered with ocean debris. He picks some up to craft fish traps instead. Using a knife, he cuts a plastic bottle in half, then inserts the neck, creating a funnel shape inside. With this, he's made a simple fish trap. It's said this method has a very high success rate. Once a fish swims in, it's nearly impossible to escape. Alan then heads to the riverbank and quickly sets up 4 or 5 traps. Whether they'll catch fish or not depends entirely on luck. Lucas, like the other 2, plans to get protein through traps. He chooses to fish in open water. Luckily, 2 foam boards he found days ago turn out to be quite useful. He cuts them into 6 pieces with his survival knife and ties them with thick rope, attaching hooks and fishing lines to each float. Now he has 6 automatic fishing devices. When finished, he drops them into the river and lets time decide his fate. Mike, starving and weak, checks his fishing net after days without real food. Perhaps fate takes pity on him, for there's a catfish caught in the net. But it's clearly been dead for at least 2 days, its flesh reeking with an unbearable stench, making it inedible. Though he hates to see precious protein go to waste, Mike doesn't dare eat it, fearing food poisoning. To calm the hunger, he can only boil a pot of water to soothe his churning stomach. On the morning of day 24, Alan can't wait any longer and goes to check the fish traps again. When he pulls up the first bottle trap, he sees at least 7 or 8 tiny fish inside. The second trap, same result. After checking 5 traps, Alan has gathered half a pot of small fish. They're not big, but there are enough to fill his belly. His emotions are beyond words. After days without a proper meal, finally he can replenish his body's energy. At the same time, Lucas paddles out to check his own setup. When he hauls one of the floats in, the weight feels unusual. It seems a large fish has taken the hook. Sure enough, when he pulls it up, there's a wild salmon weighing about 5 to 7 kilos. He's incredibly lucky, and so excited he keeps bursting into joyful laughter. No time to return to camp. He reaches shore and starts cooking immediately, frying the fish in a pan until both sides are golden and crisp, seasoned with nothing but salt water. After the pan fry, he makes a pot of fish soup, aromatic and ready in 15 minutes. The rich flavor makes him feel energy surge through his body. Sam had hoped his traps would catch Jerry to fill his stomach. But after checking, though, the traps are damaged. There isn't a single rat, not even one stray Jerry hair. He's truly out of luck. Now, with no other source of protein, he has to keep setting more traps. After days without food, Sam grows increasingly tense. His trapping attempts keep failing, and rocks scrape his hands raw. Half an hour of work and still not done. Things get worse when the rain starts again. He loses patience, cursing the stones around him, with nothing else he can do. In the end, he accepts that he'll have to go hungry tonight. Mike's situation isn't much better. When he goes to check his net, he finds it's gone. He suspects that when the tide receded, the current dragged the net away. It was his only source of protein. Without it, the coming days mean hunger. He searches along the flow, but after half an hour, there isn't a trace to be found. Mike feels worse than if his wife had left him. He tried so hard, yet now the net is gone. He wonders if he can keep surviving all the way to the end. On day 25, after savoring the taste of those tiny fish, Alan just can't stop. He figures if a small plastic bottle can catch small fish, then what about a bigger net? That would surely catch big fish. Truly, Alan's thinking is different. No sooner said than done, he hurries into the small grove, gathering a pile of branches and bends them into a circle. He builds an entrance and an exit for the trap, then connects them with a long branch for support, measuring the base length and forming a simple frame. Next, he weaves in small, flexible twigs to fill the gaps. Over the next few days, aside from eating and sleeping, Alan devotes all his time to building the trap. Time flies quickly, and the days of hunger slowly fade. By day 30, Alan's massive fish cage is finally complete. From the outside, it looks solid enough, but whether it will actually catch fish is another story. He carries it to the riverside, choosing a spot where fish often appear. But strangely, he sets it on the shore. By day 31, the temperature drops sharply. Early morning frost coats the leaves by the path. The challenge suddenly becomes much harsher. After 3 days with almost no food, Sam has lost 20 kilograms. He only hopes his trap can catch one Jerry to restore his strength. Perhaps Sam's miserable state moves even the heavens to pity. When he checks his traps, he finds one unlucky Jerry caught inside. Small as it is, for Sam it's a beacon of hope. Back at camp, he can't hide his excitement. He skins the mouse on the spot, and without seasoning, drops it straight into the pot. When the dish is done, Sam eagerly grabs a piece of meat, puts it in his mouth. Oh my God! The taste is heavenly, rich with long-lost protein. He's so overjoyed he begins to dance. It seems in this wilderness, hunger really is the best spice. Meanwhile, Alan heads to the river to check his trap. But to his shock, the massive cage hasn't caught a single fish. Furious, he yells into the camera in frustration. Once he calms down, he figures maybe the trap just hasn't been there long enough. Fish need time to get used to new surroundings. Perhaps in a few days, when he checks again, there'll be a feast waiting inside. The sudden cold snap reminds Lucas he needs to build a proper shelter fast, deep in the woods. He dismantles his old temporary camp, and since he fishes often, decides to build the new one right beside the river. He picks a wide, flat area, drives wooden stakes into the ground, forming a circle, then covers it with waterproof fabric. He lays stones inside to prevent accidental fires and constructs a cone-shaped roof with branches, finally covering it with another waterproof layer. Just like that, Lucas finishes a warm, cozy little home. As the soft sound of his guitar fills the air, he hopes the music will ease his homesickness. But the more he plays, the more the loneliness grows. Eventually, he can't hold back any longer and breaks down in tears. He plays a song called "This Spring I Won't Be Home." The sadness lingers until day 39. Lucas can no longer endure the isolation and decides to call and withdraw. Though his departure surprises everyone, it's not entirely unexpected. Compared to hunger, loneliness is the ultimate challenge contestants face in the late stage of the competition. Still, Lucas quitting now feels like such a pity. With the skills he's shown, he might very well have won. When the producers arrive, Lucas has packed up and greets them at the door, guitar in hand, in front of the camera. No tears, no regrets. After filming his post-show recap, he boards the crew's boat, eager to head home. With Lucas gone, only 3 contestants remain, and all of them have endured days of hunger. At last, Season 1 of Alone in the Wild nears its end. You'd think the final 3 would have to rely on passive skills to hang on 3 more days and starve through 3 meals to decide the winner. But unexpectedly, a short walk of 6 loops turns up a plump fish, or a quick check of the nets yields 2 big catfish. At this critical moment, the real trial is their mental stamina. Who will endure to the very end? Stay tuned. On day 39, Sam can't stand another day of mouse meat. So he heads into the woods with bow and arrow. After half an hour circling the forest, he doesn't see a single animal. Other zones at least have bears or wolves here. It's nothing but Jerry the mouse. Just then, Sam suddenly looses an arrow at a little squirrel bounding along, but sadly, his shot misses by dozens of centimeters. When he returns to camp at last, he finds a Jerry caught in the trap. However, Sam has lost all appetite for what's in front of him. Who could eat this day after day? Meanwhile, Alan has also exhausted every food source. By morning, he's dizzy and weak, his limbs powerless. The duck meat and salmon are long gone. Now there's nothing left, only relentless hunger. Alan has dropped from 200 pounds to 170. He's completely drained. One short walk leaves him breathless. There's no way he can go out to forage. In the end, he settles for a bit of moss to fill his stomach. By the next morning, Alan wakes up starving, his body frail and trembling. He tries to stand and check the fish traps, but when he reaches the shore, the tide still hasn't gone out. He'll have to wait 2 more days before retrieving the nets. At this point, Alan's so hungry his stomach sticks to his spine. He can't wait any longer. So he decides to scoop up some seaweed from the shore to eat, even though it's covered in mold. Right now, nothing else matters to him anymore. He rinses it in seawater, then stuffs it into his mouth. It's chewy, crunchy even, and, most importantly, gives him precious calories. Just seaweed feels a bit too plain, so he pulls up another handful and eats again. Watching him shove handfuls into his mouth, you can tell just how starved he really is. Meanwhile, luck finally smiles on Mike. While wandering in search of food, he spots a dead beaver lying on the shore, weighing at least 20 kilos. If he makes the most of it, Mike could very well win this entire season. He hauls it back to camp, skins and guts it clean, ties the hide with branches, and after drying, it could even serve as clothing. After so many hungry days, today Mike can finally enjoy a real meal. Time passes quickly, and it's already day 42. Today the tide finally recedes. Alan rushes to the shore to check his nets. And sure enough, 2 fat catfish caught in the mesh. He cleans them and tosses them into the pot, adding a bit of seaweed for flavor. After so many hungry days, Alan can finally enjoy a proper meal again. But when he returns to camp, he realizes the fire's nearly out. Panicking, he blows gently at the embers, then throws on a few pieces of wood, and soon the flames roar back to life. With such fine ingredients, a simple recipe is enough. No onions, no ginger, no garlic, just place the pot on the fire and let it simmer for 15 minutes. Alan sits by the shore, savoring his creation. The meat is tender, melting in his mouth. The seaweed softens the fishy scent perfectly. And of course, the protein is dozens of times richer than beef. Meanwhile, over at Sam's camp, a sudden storm hits without warning. The wind rips through and topples his tent. Panic sets in. If he's not careful, he might have to sleep outside tonight. The wind grows stronger, and Sam crawls back inside for shelter. This is the first time in 40 days here he's faced weather this bad. He wonders how much longer he can last. After the storm passes, will there even be any Jerry left to eat? With so many uncertainties ahead, Sam decides to leave it to fate. If the tent blows away, he'll take it as a sign that it's time to quit. And when that happens, he won't hesitate to leave. That night, though full from his meal, Mike feels heavy-hearted. He thinks of his aging mother back home. Her health has been declining, time is short. And while she needs him most, he's out here starving in the wilderness. $500,000 may mean a lot, but family means far more. The only thing I can do now, he says, is see my mother one last time before she passes away. After thinking it through, Mike hesitates no longer. He calls the crew and asks to withdraw. We don't know why, but when the show gets Mike's call, they grow very concerned. They even race over by skiff appearing at his camp in the middle of the night and escort him out immediately. It remains a mystery to this day in the show's history. With Mike gone, only 2 heavyweights remain. A storm has blown in on Alan's side too, but compared to Sam, who survives by scraping by on Jerry, Alan's situation is far better. Every so often, he can still enjoy a big meal. He remembers arriving full of fire and fight, but over time, that passion was worn down, leaving only hunger and endless loneliness. Realizing his mindset has shifted, Alan keeps reminding himself to live like a true wild man here, fight for that $500,000. Only then can he dull the gnawing emotions that he's battled to endure this long. With the finish line in sight, even if he has to grit his teeth, Alan will hold out to the end, because this is the only way he can break free from poverty. Time races to day 55. Sam never imagined he'd last this long. But this is his limit. The weather hasn't eased, only worsened. A few days ago, he could still catch a Jerry or 2 now and then, but gradually, he's eaten almost all of them. Now he's gone 3 days without food, nothing but water in his stomach. Thinking of his girlfriend back home about to give birth, that $500,000 no longer means what it did. He's still young, there'll be milk money for the baby somehow. The wedding can be simpler if it must. With his mind made up, Sam doesn't want to stay another minute. He calls and asks to withdraw. When the cruise boat appears swift as ever, Sam is already at the door, rushing to greet them. At just 22 years old, no one expected him to last 55 days out here. And frankly, living on Jerry day after day sets a bar future contestants will struggle to match. Thinking of the child he's about to meet, Sam packs his things and hurries home on the skiff. Time jumps to day 56. Alan is now the last man standing. At dawn, he receives a medical check notification from the show. To avoid being forced to withdraw for falling below the weight threshold, he heads into the woods, searching for any edible protein to bump his weight up. Before long, he finds 2 slugs, brings them back, and cooks them prepping for the weigh-in before the med team arrives. Alan cooperates fully with the full medical exam. Then he turns to the camera and starts boasting a little. He says as long as there's another rival out here, he won't quit. 100 days is the show's limit, not mine. Even the staff are taken aback by those words. They can't hold back their emotions. They rush to tell Alan that he's the last one standing and the official champion of the season. Hearing it, Alan can hardly believe his ears until his wife steps out from the side. Only then does he truly realize it's real. The couple embraces tightly, and in that moment, Alan feels every hardship was worth it. Once he gathers his emotions, he proudly shows his wife the small hut he's lived in for over 50 days. Then, his wife pulls out an envelope, a check for $500,000, and hands it to Alan. From this moment on, Alan has achieved true financial freedom. At last, he packs his belongings and boards a small plane home with his wife. The first season of Alone in the Wild comes to a perfect close. After receiving the prize money, Alan pays off his mortgage debts and funds treatment for his parents. From then on, he lives happily ever after with his family. And with that, this story ends. See you in the next episode.